Welcome to the Cost of Everything podcast. This week we're loved up, talking about Valentine's Day and its true cost. From the origins of the celebration to the big statistics around spend, through to the cost of flowers and its tentative links to Colombian drug cartels. I ask the question, is it really worth celebrating? If you want to avoid Valentine's Day completely, you can head to Brazil, where it doesn't exist. So, the origins of Valentine's Day. It was traditionally a feast day on the Christian calendar, celebrated on the 14th of February to honour Saint Valentine. So how did a day of honouring an early Christian martyr turn into a worldwide celebration of love? There are a few theories. The date occurs in early spring and was associated with lovebirds and the notion of courting that emerged in 14th century Europe. This courting may have included the presentation of flowers and sweets. In the 18th century, stories were circulated about the final words of the saint before his execution. He wrote a farewell letter to the jailer's daughter, signing it, "Your Valentine." In England, in the 18th century, postal reforms by Sir Rowland Hill and the invention of the penny black stamp reduced the cost of mailing, and subsequently, in fact in 1841, just a year after the postal reforms, 400,000 Valentine letters were sent. The custom of giving chocolates, letters, flowers, they're all inventions from the last 2 centuries. It's interesting to see it has spread around the world, so we will have a look at where it is most popular. But just quickly, it's interesting to see how it's celebrated. There was a coordinated campaign in the 1930s and then in the 1950s to introduce the Japanese to celebrating Valentine's Day. A slight loss in translation, an error in one of the early campaigns, meant that women gave chocolates to men. That was just an interesting anecdote, but I won't bombard you with stats. I'll give you some of the highlights here. I looked across several publications to see if there was consensus on worldwide spend and general trends related to Valentine's Day. There isn't, but I do reference several sites where I did find information, and that's all on the blog post. You can check that out, the link is in the description. So from the stats, Hong Kong appears to be the biggest spenders globally, whereas average expenditure is highest in the UK, Ireland and the US. Singaporeans are some of the biggest spenders as well, with more than half of the population saying they spend between $100 and $500. Around 190 million Valentine's Day cards are sent in the United States each year, but apparently the percentage of people celebrating the day is declining. A survey on Statista.com suggests that the main reasons are over-commercialization and simply not having a Valentine. Although some of the stats suggest that hundreds of millions of dollars are spent each year on Valentines for pets or sending flowers to themselves. 10% of marriage proposals happen on Valentine's Day as well. In fact, if you have a love story like this, you can check out a website called wherewemet.org, where you can search for stories people have posted about where their love story started. You can post yours on there too as well. Go check it out. Links in the description. According to CNBC, 70% of Americans in relationships plan to buy a Valentine's Day gift for their significant other, but expenditure can have consequences for those who can't afford much, with some taking out big debts to have big Valentine's Days. To quote, "February the 14th will come and go, but the negative effects of overspending will stick around much longer." But now we're in 2022. Could this Valentine's Day be the biggest ever? 2 years of lockdowns, so it could be a way for a lot of people to spend excessively to make up for lost time. At the very least, it will be bigger than last year, where spend on Valentine's Day in the UK was down from £1.45 billion in 2020 to $926 million in 2021. So, one of the big signs of Valentine's Day are flowers. They're a big deal. Almost $2 billion are spent each year on flowers in the United States alone. That's just for Valentine's Day. But do you know where they come from? In the US, the biggest source of flowers is Latin America, predominantly Colombia and Ecuador. who are some of the biggest exporters of flowers in the world. The mountainous regions of these countries, especially early in the year, make these ideal for meeting Valentine's demand. Couple that with lower labor costs and a beneficial trade deal with the US, and it makes this a great option for retailers. Wait, what is this trade deal? Well, it came in because of the narcos. In 1991, when Pablo Escobar was creating his cocaine empire, the US Congress passed the Andean Trade Preference Act to encourage cocoa as an export by lifting import duties. The flower industry bloomed as a result. The journeys these plants take to get to the retail shops is quite interesting. The flowers are stowed on passenger planes throughout the year. For Valentine's, however, hundreds of cargo planes are chartered. Up to 30 jets fly from Colombia to Miami every day in the first few weeks before Valentine's. If you include the same number from Ecuador, that amounts to around 15,000 tons of flowers in just 3 weeks. In Miami, the flowers are then prepared and then put into refrigerated heavy goods vehicles, ready to be transported around the country in a race against time. So why not just make them domestically? Isn't that more sustainable than transporting them halfway around the world? Well, if the roses are in demand and you grow them in the US, where the weather conditions aren't ideal, you need to greenhouse them and to keep the heaters on. There is no guarantee they will bloom in time, so you might have wasted all that energy if they appear even a day late. Each cut flower, from production to transport, can result in up to 3 kilograms of CO2 emissions. Each flower. So what about growing the flowers? There's real demand for cut flowers throughout the year, which means production processes are driven to be as efficient as possible. So to shorten the production cycle, agrochemicals are added with noted negative impacts on the soil and local water supply. Because flowers are not edible crops, there are often lower regulations on the types of pesticides used. Let's take Kenya, where the cut flower industry is worth almost $150 million per year and is one of the biggest exports from that country. There is huge controversy over the use of limited water supplies in Kenya, where over half of water extracted each year is used for flowers. It's a difficult balance, though, in a country hugely reliant on the economic return from these natural resources. Climate change is also having an impact on the predictability of growth with changing and uncertain conditions. But where do you grow them? The energy required to grow the roses in countries like the UK and the Netherlands have been shown to emit 6 times more CO2 than those grown in countries like Kenya. So then it becomes a choice and a balance and a difficult calculation to make between growing them domestically, using a lot more energy, or transporting them halfway around the world, potentially having a detrimental impact on the local climate in those developing nations. There is the other option. You can be an anti-Valentine and maybe celebrate your love every day of the year. So, can you buy love? Well, you can buy flowers, you can buy chocolates, you can spend, but it comes at more of a cost than you might think. Most flowers on the market today, for example, are imported and can be full of chemicals. So remember, take a look at the label. Look at where your flowers come from and who grew them. The decision is yours. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Cost of Everything. Remember, you can check out the blog post on thecostofeverything.net. Link is in the description. Like, share, subscribe. I'd really appreciate a review on Apple. That really helps me get out to more listeners. Thank you for listening and have a great week.